Do you like your dad? Today, we're not gonna lie. Hey everybody, welcome back to a new episode of NGL. Father's Day is coming, and in light of that, we have put together a Father's Day episode for you guys. And on the topic of relationships with our dads, we know that this could potentially also be a topic that might be a little bit difficult for some of us to talk about. But going back to the idea of NGL, we always love to talk about things that are hard to talk about because we want to offer a safe space for conversation and to share stories so you know you're less alone in these things. And so today, I've invited two very, very special people, Weiyeat and Sammy. Maybe you guys can say hi to our listeners.
Hello, hi.
Hello. Okay, they're here to share their stories about their growing up with their fathers. And I know you guys have been through quite a journey with your dad, so I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more later. In today's episode, you can look forward to hearing their stories growing up, the challenges that they've been facing, some of the really intense moments and negative emotions that they've had, but also where they are in the journey right now and how they came to that point. If I could ask you guys, right, what is one word you would use to describe your dad? What would that be and why?
One word to describe my dad is unreasonable. I think he has a lot of expectations on me that I could never fulfill. So yeah, that's one word I would describe him in the past lah.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people will relate with that actually. Sammy, what about you?
My one word is stingy. Yeah. I guess just like a very short context will be that when my brother asked him to buy a 90-cent sushi, then he was like, no. Yeah, so I guess that's why I remember him being stingy.
Okay.
But that's in the past also. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think we invited both of y'all because we know that y'all have been through quite a journey with your dad. I understand that I think both of you have come to a place where things are slightly different now. But we want to hear the process how it was really quite challenging in your growing up and also how you made sense of it up till now, right? So maybe we start with Weiyeat. How was your relationship with your dad like as you grew up? What were some things that maybe you can remember happening?
To describe my dad a bit, my dad is the, how would I say, Asian businessman in Singapore. So I think that a lot of pictures will come to your mind. Like he is someone who is very fierce. He's someone who is quite successful in his job. So I think what comes with that is that he has a lot of expectations on me. Another context is that I'm the eldest in the family. I have two other siblings, so I'm the big koko lah.
Right.
So being the eldest in a family of a dad who is an Asian businessman, it means that wow, woohoo, mountains of expectations. Expectations started even before I was born. It's in my name because my name is in Chinese is Weiyeat, right? And it actually means 伟大的事业.
Oh my god.
So noble career. Before I was even born, I have expectations to do big things in my job, Growing up, I would say he is someone who is very fierce and strict. I think when it comes to school, when it comes to my academics, I think in primary school, upper primary and secondary school, that's where I really, really had it hard going because I'm someone who is not very, very, very good in studies. I'm someone who likes to be involved. I like to be part of CCAs. I have multiple CCAs. I was a school prefect. Yeah, I joined a lot of things, but I just don't like to study, right?
Yeah.
So when the time comes where I have to ask my dad to sign report card, wow, that's part of me will die every night. That every time when I have to ask my dad to sign, because he doesn't just sign with a pen, he signed with a few canes. He signed with the cane evolves. Back then Pokemon was very in, right? So the cane evolved from one cane to two cane together. Then after that it evolved into newspaper. Then newspaper was a bit too fragile. Then he tried with rubber band with newspaper and it still flew apart. So it became 8 Days magazine. 8 Days magazine, he will roll until very, very tight until you can see no hole, right? Then he will tie up with rubber band, a few rubber bands. That's how I grew up now, with, I would say, fear of knowing that I won't meet his expectation, fear of what would come when I fail to meet his expectation. And I think that growing up, I was very scared of going home. I was spending a lot of time outside and I don't dare to go home. And when I do go home, right, it's very late and all I see is my angry dad in front of a large TV with the volume very loud.
His house TV really very big.
Yeah, it was back then till now.
My
It's
goodness.
always very big. So yeah, it's all about the experience. My dad loved a big screen and he likes to watch like war movies. So a lot of pam 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 pam.
Actually quite scary.
Yeah, then he's just one angry man
All
sitting in front of the
surround
TV and then very angry and just stare like that. Like wow. So that's what I see when I go home usually.
Actually, when you were sharing, then yeah, I just got reminded of my own childhood, but it's very different. Like it's significantly different. Yeah, because for me, I think I came from a family background where my dad was not so present. So for you, is your dad was very present and like overly present. Yeah, so a bit of context is that like my dad works a lot overseas.
Right.
Yeah, so he's always like flying to different countries. Whenever I'm home, I don't really see him. Yeah, so I always felt like I grew up in a single parent family, even though I didn't. Yeah, because the only times that he'll be home, right, he'll be in his room sleeping. I guess that's the context, like, growing up. Yeah, then I guess on top of that, maybe what I really remember more is like the fact that he's very stingy. So he's not just stingy on like time, but I think he's stingy on like resources also. Yeah, which is weird, right? Because I mean, if he go overseas,
he go
to,
overseas
like,
to work,
right? Then technically, he should be contributing like financially. I remember this one incident that really, I guess, struck a chord with me. Is like my mom and my dad signed me up for a lot of like tuitions, piano class, ballet class, and a lot of classes, right? So you can imagine the amount that they have to pay each month is like not little.
Yeah.
So my mom will pay first. Then after she pay really, she will need to ask him back because they split half. Yeah, so I remember there was one day, I think she was trying to collect back money again. So then my dad was sitting in his room, then he was sitting down, then his back was facing her. She tried to ask him like to pay her back money. The thing about my dad is that he doesn't flare up, but he gets very silent when he doesn't want to answer you. Like he can really ignore you.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So he was ignoring my mom when she was asking. Then my mom is the kind that the more you ignore me, the angrier I'll
Yeah.
get. So she really like, whoo, yeah. So she was standing outside, then she really like trying to ask for it. Then I think my dad suddenly stood up. Then I was like, okay, this is weird. Because he's not the kind to react. So I thought he was going to like smack us or something. But okay, my dad didn't lah. Because he's a very calm person when it comes to this kind of thing. He just stand up. Then I thought he was going to slap. So I run out of the house. Because I really damn scared he's going to slap us. Yeah, but in the end, it was just like I guess that kind of like incidences just make me think that my dad doesn't want to pay my mom like money back. Like he just doesn't want to contribute, I guess. Yeah, so I think that is something that I grew up kind of like disrespecting my dad for. Yeah, it's like how come you say you will pay half but in the end you never pay back. Yeah, or like how come you go overseas and work but then in the end you still never pay for all these things. Yeah, and I think it was just a lot of like struggling to really understand why. Yeah, because it made me realize that getting money back was so difficult. Yeah. Then I was like, why you put my mom through that? You know, kind of thing. Like, why? Yeah. I was a lot closer to my mom.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you would imagine that obviously in their marriage, then definitely she's also not the happiest towards him, right? So you can imagine that since my mom and I are a lot closer, a lot of my impressions of him is being formed not just on what he does, but my mom's interpretation of what he does.
And she will say a lot to you.
So I will have like what I see plus what she says about him add together. It's like I find it very hard to like really respect him even. Yeah, so it will be to the point where like I won't talk to him or like I won't even look him in the eye, that kind of thing.
Do you have some like as you're recounting your childhood now, right? Do you have some like incidents or stories that come to mind?
He used to be quite violent. I mean, typical Asian like it's not Asian family if you don't get cane, right? So when he does punish and discipline, it was quite traumatic. There was once when I was in my room studying, doing homework. Thankfully, when it happened, I was doing my work and I was in my earpiece listening to music. But what happened in that one incident is that suddenly I felt a kick from behind, a very violent kick, and I was shocked. So I was like I was shocked out of like that impact. I looked behind, removed my earpiece. I saw that my dad was behind me. Then my chair that I was sitting in, it broke into two, and it was what I was looking at. It was my dad being very angry, staring at me. he was like very upset about something that I did, which I really cannot remember what it was, but it was very memorable that when I think about my childhood and my dad, I remember that one incident where it came out of nowhere. So that was that phase is that phase that he, when he's very angry and upset, that will send like, you know, chills down my spine.
Like, do you ever stand up to him, or is very like keep inside one?
Okay, not a lot lah. I think a few moments where I really couldn't take it. Like, it was so unreasonable. I shouted back. Then things escalate. You know, like it become very violent. He was so strong that he could carry me with one hand, like both my hand he would carry me, and then the other hand use the 8 Days magazine and whack my leg.
Oh my gosh.
So
Wait, and how old were you?
This was secondary school.
In secondary school, he can carry you with one
he
hand.
can carry. So it's like he swing already, then my leg will swing to another direction, then he will drop me, and then he will swing again.
Cannot even carry my dog with one hand.
How heavy is your dog?
Very fat.
Yeah, my dog very fat.
Yeah, I mean he was strong lah. I must say he was strong. I think because of but I mean that was anger against anger lah. That he's angry, I'm angry. We're just angry together. But my anger comes with a lot of fear. His angry is
Just
when
so
I angry with him, he become even more angry.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I think when it comes to JC, I think it has come to a point where I think my dad know that I'm a bit too old for physical discipline, and I think it became less of that and more of like scolding, like more. It become more verbal than physical. So I think that's how it was like lah. Yeah, this until JC period. Yeah.
I mean, if you don't mind me asking, like, what were some of the things that I guess he would say to you or about you as you grow older?
I think some things that comes to my mind is that he will say things like why are you wasting my money, like because like send you to school and then you spend your time on useless things, you know, like being part of multiple CCAs, like joining school council and whatsoever lah. So I think that's one thing that he would say, like, don't waste my money, why are you spending your time on all these useless things. Yeah, so I think it is all these things that he would say that it's quite hurtful, because I think those are things that I find myself enjoying and being very passionate about. Yes, it doesn't really contribute much to my academics. In fact, it does really affected my academics a bit, because like I spent a lot of time on all these things lah. So granted, I think that was valid. But I think it was these things that make me feel that, wow, my dad don't really care about what I like, you know, what I'm passionate about.
At the peak of it, right? Like, what was that like for you guys? And, you know, how bad was it?
I think in secondary school days, it was when it hit the peak lah. Because I guess that's the season where I start to like realize that I'm craving for a like male figure in my life. I remember last time I always had an existential crisis. I always ask people like, why I like guys so easily? Like in my secondary school days, like I would crave for that kind of like attention. I guess that continued all the way until like sec 4 when I got into a relationship. Yeah, then that's when I realized like, hey, actually this is a male figure's love that I never got before from my dad. So I think for me the peak really came only after the breakup. Yeah, because I think that's when I realized that, wow, actually I was using him as like a refuge, I guess. A hiding space, a safe space where I could be myself, where I could tell him that like, okay, outside of school, this is my family. Because he knew about it, right? So he always knew that like my family was going through its own tensions, its own difficulties, and he knew the real me lah. So I think when that person in my life was taken away, then I was just like, oh dang, like you know, all the support and all the like,
it's like literally your world came crashing.
Yes, like if you can put it that way, I'll put it that way. It's like really everything just came crashing. And I think for me that was the peak, because we broke up in J1. So that was like my prelim period also in JC. Then it was just like, wow, it was turmoil, because I remember like I was already struggling with prelims after the breakup. Then after the breakup, I started to realize like, oh my gosh, like actually I'm also struggling with family. Yeah, so it was really the peak where I wasn't doing well in school. Then I didn't. Okay, so the thing about being in a relationship is sometimes it distances you from your friends. Yeah, so I also was cut off from a lot of friendships at that point. Yeah, so it was like friendships gone, then relationship gone, then like results also gone, then family also is a mess. So I remember like there was this one day I was in my room, then I was just like crying. Yeah, then I told my mom like, okay, the thing about me is that I'm not genuinely struggling with like depression or whatever. It was really just at that point I wanted her attention. So I just say things like, like, you know, if you don't help me, then like I will like self-harm, that kind of thing. But I didn't really mean it. I just wanted her attention.
Wow,
Yeah. So I
okay.
think at that point there was a lot of turmoil going
Yeah.
on at home because my mom was put through a lot of like pressure.
Like worry about
Like
you.
worry about me. Then she'll go and tell my dad like, you know, your daughter said these kind of things, like that kind of thing. Then I ask him to think about it. But at the point my dad was just like, huh, really? Because I never shared to him. Like I always look like I'm doing okay. Yeah. So I think for me that was like the biggest down, like most down period for me in my growing up years. So I think it really peaked in J1.
I think the peak of it, of when I realized that wow, it was very bad, right, is I think when I grow older, then I become more and more aware about like my expectations of what my dad should do for me. I think I become a bit more like, I think my dad should be like this to me. This when I'm in JC, then when in my exploration of things in the outside world, outside my house, right, outside my home, right, like through relationships, I learn about expectations of relationships. I learn about achievements, like things I'm proud of that people rain praises about, but my dad finds them useless. Then another thing that I think I explored when growing up was I actually came to church. Like I went to church, I came to know God. Church, we always talk about like, oh, God is a heavenly father, he loves a lot. And when I see that picture of like knowing that, oh, there's a heavenly father who loves me, naturally people will think that, wow, it's a nice thing to know that, oh, there's a heavenly father who loves you. But to me, it made me reflect and think that, wow, I think I hated my dad even more, because I felt that if a father figure is supposed to look like that, how come I didn't get any hint of that from my dad? I felt that, wow, so I've been deprived of a fatherly love after seeing how a father's love can look like. For a moment, I really felt that, wow, I really feel that, okay, if this is where I can find love, or this is how love looks like, right, then I kind of say that I think my dad don't love me. And that made me feel very sad lah, like, wow, why is my dad like that? Like, why is he always so angry, and why do I find it so hard to understand him?
I guess for both of you, it sounds like you had quite a big realization about yourself. I mean, for Sammy, the fact that when that relationship fell apart, how like, wow, actually this area of family impacted me so much. And then I think for Weiyeat, you had to come to terms with the fact that your childhood looked a certain way, right? Like, what was the journey beyond that, like, you know? Because I think realizing it is one thing, but sometimes the realizing can make you really fall apart lah, when you realize how bad it was. Yeah. So how are you two still sitting here talking about your childhood with a smile on your face, you know?
Actually quite similar. Like mine was also JC period where I came to that point of realization, right?
Yeah.
That perhaps this is how I view my dad, and perhaps this was how much his absence has kind of like influenced me growing up and my perspective of like relationships. I did realize that I was starting to hate him for being absent, mainly because I'm very close to my mom. That's why that kind of hatred grew, because
Like,
I felt like
experience,
and I wanted to protect her in some sense. Like I felt that like, since you are her husband, then you should be doing certain things. You should live up to certain expectations. Yeah, so I think that's why my hatred towards him grew. Not because of the things that he didn't do, because it wasn't very severe. It wasn't like physical abuse or anything. Yeah, but it was more of like, because I'm very close to my mom, so I always feel like I need to protect her. Yeah, then I'll be like, why are you like that? Then I'll just not like him and hate him. Yeah.
What happened after that though? Like, because I think whatever you just described is quite common lah for people who maybe see the effects of a father's absence. I think in your case, your dad was still in your family, just that he wasn't really very present. But I also know of many people whose dads actually like did walk out on the family, and I think like it's very hard lah to have fond feelings towards your father when he walked out, or to have fond feelings towards your father when you know he cheated on your mother, right? And I think a lot of children, when you see the effect that it has on the other parent, you will want to side lah with your mother, especially when she's the one who has provided for you and cared for you. So in your case, like, I guess, how did you move on from that, and like what was that journey like?
I think it was a very gradual process, and even until now I would say it's still a work in progress, because it's like so many years of like growing a certain prejudice against my dad already.
Yeah.
Like, if let's say today he says something, I will interpret it as something super negative, mainly because of my lens of him. Yeah, so I think it's still a work in progress. But I think what really helped along the way was, I think, very small things. Like, for instance, I remember I tried my best to open up more to my family, like about how I'm really feeling and how I'm really doing. So I remember in J2, one of my church mentor challenged me to actually talk to my family and to gather them together to pray for me for my A-levels. Yeah, then I was like, siao ah, like they won't pray for me lah. Like, why would they care about me? Especially like my dad, right? Yeah, but then it was the first time we really gathered together to kind of like commune and like talk to each other. So that was quite a good start. Yeah, then I think subsequently, I tried to jio like family meals, that kind of thing. Mainly because I really wanted to know my dad as a person. Yeah, because I felt like I was just knowing him based on what my mom said.
But how did you get there, like from a place of like, wow, you're a terrible person to
Yeah.
like, I want to know you more. It's quite a jump, eh?
I guess I would really have to say that it's quite an internal shift, and I would say it's because of my faith lah. Yeah, because I think I really came to a point where I realized that actually I also make mistakes in life. Yeah, so for me also, like, I think when I look back on my previous relationship, right, I think I really hurt the person a lot. Like, in terms of like how I drew parallels between him and my dad, to put him down, to say like, hey, why you do this? You remind me of my dad.
You told him that?
Yeah, I told him that.
Wow.
Yeah, so like, I think it was all these instances where I started to realize that, hey, actually, even in a relationship myself, like, I am also not the best. Like, it was just a realization that, hey, actually, I also make mistakes. Yeah, then I started to realize that, a bit like Weiyeat, I need to cut my dad some slack to a certain extent lah. Along the years also, actually, I got into a lot of like ambiguous friendships. Yeah, so it was always like I wanted the attention, but I didn't want to commit. So when I realized how many people I hurt along the way also, then I realized like, okay, actually we all like make mistakes. Yeah, and we all hurt people along the way. So I think that was a lot easier for me to realize that, okay lah, I also want to mend this relationship with my dad. Yeah.
And I think that when I asked myself whether I could forgive my dad, I think I realized that I find it very hard to do so because like, of all the hurts that he has caused on me, right? But because I know that it has a toll on me when I continue to be unforgiving, I continue to blame him, I continue to think of a certain way of him, right? It was very tiring. It felt like I couldn't get past this stage of myself, to grow up. That really helped me to come to terms and to realize that, okay, yeah, he really goes through a lot of stress. I think he goes through a lot of struggles and battles on his own. I think like at work it was very stressful, dealing with a lot of like financial issues, a lot of quarrels and even like think quarrels escalate to even like court cases and all because of inheritance and everything. And I think that made me realize that perhaps I really needed to learn to forgive my dad, but more importantly, to see past the hurts that he has caused, but to really actually recognize that he's also someone who is imperfect. My dad as a person has really been overshadowed by my expectation of him. That I expected him to be better, I expected him to be loving. But I think all this expectation has really shadowed and clouded the fact that my dad is imperfect and he also deserves forgiveness lah. So that made me realize that, okay, I think that I've been quite strict on my dad myself based on my expectation of him, that even though all these things that he has done in the past growing up, I realized that I didn't really give him a chance to realize that he's also a person with his own battles, with his own struggles, and I think that made me realize that, yeah, my dad imperfect lor, and if I'm an imperfect person, then why am I having the expectation for him to be perfect? That was unfair.
I feel this is a very interesting perspective because I feel you exercise quite a bit of empathy towards your dad and even though you are, I guess, bearing the brunt
of his imperfections, right? And the thought that I have is that I feel as we become adults, maybe that also is a choice that we get to make. Like, it sucks that there were certain things in our childhood that were not ideal, right? But as you become an adult, do you want to continue remaining in the shadow of that child and that whole childhood trauma, or do you want to, I guess, decide what you live by and who you want to be like? And it does seem that in your case you chose empathy, which I think is not easy to do. I don't think it diminishes the pain that you went through also, but I find it quite admirable that you are willing to put yourself in your dad's shoes to try and figure out why he may have been the way he was. I'm quite curious also, particularly for Weiyeat, right? Because Weiyeat, your dad, right? Weiyeat has a very, very cute son. Yeah, has becoming a dad changed the way you see your dad in any way?
When I brought my son home to visit my parents, right? The funny thing is this when my dad is with my son, with his grandson, right? Honestly, I couldn't recognize him. Like he became someone who is so gentle, so tender, so funny, and he's so like everything that my son does, like simple tricks or blurting out like papa and everything, make him so proud. Makes my dad so proud. And when I see my dad laugh and smile at what my son does, it really made me realize that, wow, who is this man? who is this man that I cannot recognize? And I think that really helped me to realize that this is the side of my dad that perhaps I've forgotten. So I think being a father really changed the whole new, it opened a whole new world for my relationship with my dad.
I think I just find it quite interesting that you say this, because I can imagine it going the other direction as well. That as you become a father, you see how much you love your son, how much you're willing to pour out for him, and then you come to terms with how much your dad failed you. You get what I mean? Like it could very much have gone the other way. I think also, I know of people who maybe see their parents playing with their kids, right? Then feel like, how come you can do this for my kid but you couldn't have done this for me last time? Yeah, was there ever a thought that crossed your mind?
I think now that I have this son as a responsibility, a priority in my life, I think seeing my dad interact with him, right? Honestly, it didn't really cross my mind, or perhaps I was long beyond the stage where I still blame him. I think I've come to terms and I have learned that, my dad doesn't have the easiest of life. I am thankful for him, for sacrificing in his ways. I think that in his own way, that I think he really provided for the family. We were never in lack. I have come to terms with that, and now that I see that my dad is happy and joyful because of us visiting with our son, I think that was something that I was okay to settle with.
Sammy, how's your relationship with your dad now after all those years?
I guess it's like a work in progress, like what I shared earlier. I think ever since the more dinner gatherings together and whatnot, I started to see him open up a bit more about his struggles. Yeah, because I realized that, I don't know, is it a guy's thing or what, but they are more like men of few words. They just contain everything to themselves. They don't share their burdens and struggles with you. Yeah, so I think it was only very recently then I realized actually all the years that my dad has been trying to provide for us, he also went through his own struggles. I think it was all this realization that made me realize that what I wanted from him was emotional support, but then what he was trying to give me was financial support. Yeah, so I guess there was a mismatch in that. But definitely there are still some days where I get angry at him. I remember back then when I went to JB, then I got stomach flu. Then my dad said, okay, so it was really quite bad. Okay, my fever was 39 degrees, that kind of thing. Then I was going to the toilet so often, then I even vomited and everything. Then my dad just said, all of us were, because I went with my family. He was all of us are fine. I think you got a weak stomach. Yeah, then he's like, even I'm stronger than you. Then I was like, wait. That's a very bad joke to pull. I haven't even fully recovered and he said it. Yeah, then I think after that he felt a bit bad because I could see in his eyes, he was like, okay, sorry, shouldn't have said that. Wrong joke. Yeah. But I think it's all these moments that it will still like make me think like, do you not like care about me as your daughter, that kind of thing? Because I mean, after all, I'm a girl, right? Yeah, but I think that aside, definitely starting to grow more in our relationship in terms of like talking to each other. Yeah, so I would say that my dad actually is the one who's a bit more intentional recently to ask me to meet up for like breakfast one-on-one. It's a bit awkward.
Do you have anything to talk about?
He asked me about life, like, because recently I got attached, then he asked me, so how do you know you want to marry this guy? Like, oh, that's a very deep question. Yeah, but I guess we do share life. He tries to ask me about my life. Yeah, then he will tell me like, I'm trying to play the catch-up game. Then I say, oh, okay, sure. But still a bit awkward lah, because no matter what, it's like, it was still pure in comparison to if he was there with me like in my growing up like primitive years. So getting better.
Do y'all have, I think we've covered quite a bit into this episode and we've heard quite extensively about both your growing ups, which I'm very thankful for that you guys share your stories with such openness. As we come to the close of the episode, right, is there any encouragement that you might want to leave with our listeners? Because I'm assuming that quite a number of people who would have clicked into this episode probably have a difficult relationship with their dad, and I think we know that every difficult relationship is a little bit different, but there probably are some commonalities, like whether it's worth hoping for something more, whether it's really my problem that like he was a bad dad, things like that. Like, are there any thoughts that you might want to leave with them to encourage them in this journey?
I think there will be times when you will feel that like you take a few steps forward and then on like super bad days you feel like you took even more steps backward in terms of like family relationship. Yeah, I think that comes to me quite a lot sometimes. Even now, like sometimes it's like, oh, I thought things are going well, like, oh, we are going for overseas trip together as a family. Yeah, but then during the family trip, then actually we step on each other's toes. Then you will just think to yourself like, is it even worth it?
Yeah, just stay in Singapore.
Yeah, just stay in Singapore, right? Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah, but I think despite that, I would say that I think what keeps me going on is like really having this mentality of like, okay, what is my dad's like lived reality? I think I'm very big on the whole like, okay, what's people's lived realities? Because I realize that everyone has a different lived reality and everyone is going through very different things. Yeah, so sometimes when I have chats with my dad or like when I ask him more about like things, then he'll tell me like, oh yeah, like actually today's a bad day at work, or like, actually because sometimes he'll accidentally lash out on me lah, like sometimes when he gets very stressed at work. So it's not to the extent of like physical abuse or what, but I think it is to the extent where like I will get quite hurt by him sometimes, like bit verbally. Yeah, but I think it's like when I check in on him, then I say like, hey, actually, why do you say that just now, that kind. Then he'll be like, yeah, I'm so sorry, it was a bad day at work. Yeah, so I think I realized that it's just having to grow a deeper understanding of each other in the family. Yeah, and between me and my dad is really trying to understand him better and allowing him to also understand me better. Yeah, because I feel that he doesn't know what hurts me or he doesn't know what pricks me. Yeah, so it's like when I make it known to him, then at least he's aware. Yeah, then it gets better from there.
I guess what I'm hearing from you also is that it is not too late to start this catch-up game, which I feel actually is quite hopeful lah, because I imagine like sometimes it really can feel like the time to have built that relationship was like years ago or even like a decade ago, right? And we just have like missed that window. But it's quite encouraging and refreshing to hear from you that even in your adulthood you are building that relationship with your dad, and in a sense trying to build, still getting a bit pissed off and irritated sometimes, which totally happens. It's very understandable and relatable. But I think I am walking away also knowing that there is actually still room to continually build my relationship with my dad, with my parents as an adult. So yeah, thanks. That was really quite refreshing insight. What's your thoughts on it, Weiyeat?
I think my encouragement is that don't just think about like what your dad has expectations of you, but actually you fail to realize that actually we also have expectations of them lah. Like that how they should be of a certain way, they should be less strict, more flexible, more communicative. to express more, to talk more. But I think that all these are also expectations that we also kind of like borrow from our environment, like from the world. Like, oh, you know, TV shows say that, you know, family looks like that, and I expected you to know, but you don't know. Like being a dad myself, I learned that, you know, no one really prepared me to be a dad. I think that you don't go through a course where you're like, oh, how to be a dad 101, right?
Yeah.
And you really have to figure out on your own, and you may think that you're ready, but wow, when you really get into it, when you're really taking care of a life, right, you realize that there are so many things that you realize you don't really know. There are so many good resources out there to teach you how to be a good dad, but you won't know which one is the best or whatsoever. So everyone has their own limited resources or access to resources or knowledge on how to be a good parent. And I think that it's very difficult and hard already to be a parent. And I think that if not more, but like it will be very stressful lah. Like if you really have already like can you imagine like if your dad already has so many things on his plate and now he needs to also take care of you, having an expectation of him to be a certain way may not be fair. I think that as much as we hope for the better that our dad will be a certain way, we have to recognize that they are also growing. I think that they are still growing up. Until now, I'm being a dad, I'm still trying to figure out, I'm still learning on the way. I think like parenting really looks very different at every stage of life. And I think that that is something that I would also wish for my son to have of me, to be gracious, to know that, okay, I may not have everything figured out, but I'm trying. And I think it's really about giving our dads the chance to try. Sometimes we have walls against them. They want to try, also don't dare to try. And easily they will just slip into the status quo lah, that okay, if this is what I'm comfortable with, we stick with it. But I think that if we are willing to try as children ourselves, it's not wrong for us to initiate, to try, to make a difference. I think it starts somewhere. If you find yourself more work than your dad, then do something first, right? You don't wait until your dad do something. So I guess it's really it takes two hands to clap lah, I feel. Don't be too hard on your dad. Father's Day, if y'all don't really talk about anything, y'all can't talk, right? My tip for you is to write a card.
Really? You will write a card to your dad?
For a start, if this is your first card, don't write too long. Just say Happy Father's Day. Just thank him for one thing. I think I tried it lah. It was tough. My first card was quite short, but when you start on it, you start to open up.
It breaks the ice a little bit.
Yeah, yes, it breaks a bit, and I think gradually it starts something. Yeah, so trust me on this. I think you can do it. Yeah, you have to just give it a shot.
Interestingly, I think one thing that I realized hearing your story, right, is that many times maybe our parents also are a product of their own upbringing. Like, because you parent according to how you were parented, right?
Yep.
Most people, I think either you emulate how your parents brought you up or you go the other direction because you really think that it sucked and it was very bad. But I also think it's a younger generation thing. Last time they not so like complicated and like, wow, my parents parented me this way and it's so bad until like I will parent my kids the other way, right? I feel it's quite our generation we start to think like that. But I think what I'm capturing also is that actually, I guess for better or for worse, our upbringing really has an impact on us if we do become parents in future. And I think part of us growing is recognizing that our parents are a product of their upbringing and possibly giving them grace and space in that. But also for ourselves, then actually it's very important to heal from your own growing up. Because if not, then I guess this is just going to be perpetuated through generations, right? And I think for myself as a young adult, before having kids, I do think that there's room to go and like really process and think about how our upbringing and our relationship with our parents have impacted us for better or for worse. And I do think that in some cases it could really be quite intense as well lah. Like I do know of people who struggle with things like anxiety because of a difficult relationship that they have with their parents. I know of people who have really more serious like experiences that cause them to have some form of trauma as well. And I think if there are these forms of implications on you, right, actually there really is no shame in seeking professional help as part of your healing journey. Because if we all believe that it's good to be healthy, right, and it's good to, I guess, be your own person
Yep.
as an adult, to walk out of the shadow of your childhood. And then actually there's really no shame in seeking help if you need that help, or to talk to some friends who may be able to walk you through that.
Yeah.
And I think it's just part of becoming a healthier adult and becoming our own person as we mature and grow up. Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing your stories with us. I don't think it was easy right, to open up about these kind of things, and I don't know whether it's the first time actually that you all are doing this, but thank you for letting NGL have the honor of hearing your stories chronologically like that. And for those of you who are watching our episode, we hope that you found this relatable. If you are in fact struggling in some way with your relationship with your dad, I think like what we said many times, everybody's relationship with their dad is very different, and it's very hard for us to capture every single person's experience with their dad with just two people. But we hope that from these two stories, you at least found some things that were relatable, that you felt understood in certain things. And if there are any things at all that you feel you want to share, or you want to kind of like have a conversation about, right, our DMs are really always open. Our Telegram channel as well is really open for you to just join in for a conversation, and we would love to chat with you. If Father's Day is particularly difficult for you, we understand. I think we have friends as well who really, really struggle with celebrations like that. But there's always room for us to have conversations together if it is hard for you. So thank you for joining us in this episode. We hope that you really enjoyed it. If you like our video, you can like this. You can share it with your friends who might enjoy it as well, and subscribe to our channel. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok at ngl.people, and you can find our content on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. We have a Telegram group if you want to join us for conversations in between episodes, and we would just love to be able to engage with you guys so much more. So we've come to the end of our episode, and until next time, we'll see you again. Bye!